Hey, what's going on YouTube? It's Pyromancer here, and welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all having a wonderful day, morning, afternoon, evening, whatever time it is, wherever you are in the world. And man, oh man, has it been an exciting last week, really, since the initial release of the new World of Warcraft book, Shadows Rising. Now, I gotta throw this out there. This is the first time I've actually intentionally purchased a World of Warcraft book twice. One of these will eventually be littered with sticky notes and things like that, so that I can easily reference back to it. The other one will be kept completely clean, and I'm very happy to have two copies. One of these copies I would love to eventually have maybe signed by Madeline, and maybe put in some kind of case or something. I think that'd be cool, considering she was the first real interview that I've ever had. I think it'd be really cool, especially because I enjoyed the book so much. It'd be cool to have that from her, so I'm sure I'll be able to get in touch with her about that. With that being said, you guys, in this video, I was actually first off going to do two separate videos, one with spoilers, one without. What I'm going to do instead is I'm just going to have it all in one video, but I'm going to keep like the first half spoiler free, and the second half we'll delve into some of the spoilers. So if you want some of the juicy tidbits, make sure you stick around for the latter half of this review. Before we get into it, I would also like to mention, you guys, I certainly do appreciate if you guys would subscribe to my channel. We are nearing the 100K subscriber mark. We're getting there, and all the support with that certainly does help. As does a like on the video. Really helps with the algorithm, and makes me feel good. Having more likes on the video. It's kind of fucked up, isn't it? Anyway, makes me feel good. If you guys don't know, you can purchase this book on Amazon. I'll have a link to that in the description down below. And if you are a fan of the World of Warcraft universe, specifically characters like Nathanos, Talanji, Zakan, Thrall, Jaina, Anduin, I mean, there's so many different characters in this book. But if some of those characters sound interesting to you, then you should probably pick it up. At least check out the Audible version or the Kindle version if you don't want to spend the $25 for the physical copy. Before I get into my review, I just want to quickly address some of the things that I've seen in other reviews that I think people just really need to understand. I think the first thing is that characters aren't static. And so I've seen some people say that they are mischaracterizing characters in this book. And I would say on a very specific level with a couple different characters, perhaps they could have had more build-up. But I don't think it's a mischaracterization for a character to change, right? Like, that's the entire point, I think, of what Madeline was going for in this book, is you have a state where the characters are starting at, and some of them are finishing in a different spot than where they started. And unless you want the book to be 500 or 600 pages long, or, in other words, 180,000 words, as it's about 90, as Madeline tells me, then you're probably not going to get the build-up for those changes that you would like. Now, with that being said, a lot of this is directed at characters like Illyria and Turalyon, and so in the second half of the review, where I talk about the spoilers, we're going to get into that. We'll talk about Jaina briefly. We will talk about Tyrande, because I'm honestly just going to tear some of these other reviews apart of people that are just really not giving it a fair chance. I don't feel like. From my perspective, I really enjoyed the book. I would say, and I have quite a few of them back there, this is probably one of my favorite World of Warcraft books ever. I mean, back there I've got Dawn of the Aspects, Shadows Rising, Before the Storm, Shadows of the Horde, Arthas, Illidan, War Crimes, Tides of War. War Crimes and Tides of War are both very, very good as well. I mean, most of those books are very good. But the point is, I think for something that's especially relatable, given the current expansion of Battle for Azeroth, I think it makes this book much easier to follow, because it's all set in very familiar places with very familiar characters, making reference to very familiar recent events. And really, I think it's important to understand that this book is really a bridging of post-BFA to Shadowlands. The book ends with the scene of Sylvanas breaking open the sky above Icecrown Citadel. I would say, especially given how many characters there are in this book, where you're getting many different perspectives. Again, those are going to include Talanji, Nathanos, Anduin, Jaina, Thrall. You're mostly getting, for the most part, you're getting Nathanos, Talanji, Zakan, and I would say Thrall. Anduin is pretty present as well. You get some Gen Greymane in there. You get a lot of Matthias Shaw, and you get a lot of Flynn, which is, I thought that was very fun. All of that included. You're getting some Tyrande. You're getting just a little bit of Sylvanas at the very end. So understand that this book is not about Sylvanas. It's not a Sylvanas novel. It's really a main characters moving forward kind of novel. I would say one of the things that made this book most enjoyable, like all the other things aside, like in regards to having it be relatable as far as the characters go, I think the descriptions really just do an excellent job, right? Like when I read a book, I want that book to put an image in my head, right? And I think that having things be so familiar, like for instance, one of the things that's described a couple different times is Zuldazar, the city of Zuldazar, or the swamps of Nazmir, right? Or like the coast right off of Zandalar. So these are places that I've seen in the game. It's much easier for me to develop an image in my head, right? The throne room of Stormwind, or Goldshire Inn, right? That's actually a place that we visit once in the book. Nordrassil. These are places that when Ro is describing them, really puts an image in your head that makes you, it lets you connect to it, because she really just hits a nail on the head as far as words used to really make you like see it. And I think it goes a step beyond that in not just physical descriptions of places, but also people. Like without getting into the actual literature itself, the way that Talanji is described as like cutting her hand through the air, and her rings and jewelry like, you know, twinkling and chiming as she's doing it. It's just these little things that really, in a nuanced and meaningful way, connect you with the identity of that character. Ways that Flynn is described as like smelling, right? Like that's the kind of thing when it says someone smells like salt and whiskey and soap and whatever, you know what I mean? Like that's the kind of thing that really puts you in there with that character. And I just think that an excellent job was done in regards to the character descriptions. And then I think even a step beyond that, within the book itself, I felt as though there were some moments of very evidently like high emotion and tension, especially with characters like Anduin, Illyria and Turalyon, Jaina, and Tyrande, and Thrall. There are some pretty high tension moments, even between Bwonsamdi and Zakan, or Bwonsamdi and Talanji. It wasn't just descriptions of those situations and of those characters, but the way that you felt emotionally connected to it, I would say was very well done for the most part. Like for instance, without getting, into spoilers, there's a point where Thrall has an interaction with Tyrande, and it is very tense. It is very tense, and the image that's put into your head makes it all the more tense. The descriptions of the characters themselves, how they're handling the situation, makes it even more intense. And I think that given the memories of some of the most recent events in World of Warcraft, like the burning of Teldrassil, I think that having that so relevant as far as the time span of this all goes, I think really just drives home the intensity of some of these situations and some of these interactions. The book was about 284 pages, if I'm not mistaken, though Rue let me know she generally goes by words, which this is a standard novel length of about 90,000 words. I found it very, very easy to read. There have been times in Warcraft books in the past where there's words that are used where I frankly just have to look them up because I don't know what they mean. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. You learn new words that way. I mean, that's an expansion of your vocabulary. That's a wonderful thing. But in this one, I didn't really feel like I needed to do that. It was a pretty easy read overall. Like it flowed very well. On the note of flow, I think for me that was one of the biggest things was it did flow really, really well. As far as situation to situation, there were cuts from one perspective to another, but it was done in such a way that you can still, there's still a very smooth movement from situation and scene to scene, which felt nice. I've had situations in the past with previous novels where there certainly were some times where we kind of jumped from one specific time to another and it wasn't made evident enough, so the actual transition was left a little bit confusing. So that's something that I didn't have any issues with in this book. I feel like I'm a pretty good reader. I comprehend literature pretty well, I feel like. The 284 pages took me about 5.5, 6 hours to read, so it wasn't a terribly long read. I think that most people would have a pretty smooth time reading this book. As far as the audio version, that one is actually narrated by the woman who does Talanji's voice in the game. But I'll have a link to the audio version down in the description below as well. And I've heard so far that that's very good as well. So, I mean, I would say overall, the book was good. And it made sense from where it started. It made sense to where it ended. And overall, I enjoyed it. However, there were a couple things that to me didn't really make a lot of sense. Like there is a scene in the book, and this isn't giving too much away, but there's basically a group of bad guys that Talanji is having an issue with, and they have about 60 people to their forces overall. And so when you think about 60 people, I mean that's a good amount of people, but we're also talking about a force that was basically apparently a threat to overrun Zuldazar. And then in Zuldazar, their forces were only 40 strong. And then another group comes to help Zuldazar, and they were only able to double the efforts to 80. So it's just, I know that the Fourth War was rough, and I know that the fight against N'Zoth was really rough. That just seemed maybe a little bit too small scale, considering the threat that was apparently being posed in the entire situation, like what the bad group was trying to carry out. It seems like the gravity of that situation probably, it just doesn't feel like the number of soldiers involved in the skirmish is properly representative of how intense and important it actually was, if that makes sense. So that was one gripe that I did have with the book, that I wasn't really sure. You know, I just feel like that maybe could have been a little bit better. With that being said, I mean, there are a couple of how would you put this? There are a couple of like relationships that exist within the game that are not like your typical man-woman relationship. And, you know, so as far as how those were executed, I felt like those were very tasteful. I feel like it was done with a proper amount of build-up, and I actually quite enjoyed it. So I mean, as far like in general, I think overall the book was pretty darn good. I think it's worth a read, right? Even if you don't think it's the best book that you've ever read or the best Warcraft book that you've ever read, or maybe it's your first book in the World of Warcraft universe, I think it's worth a read. If you played Battle for Azeroth, you'll understand who pretty much all the characters are. You know, you have like basically one or two like new characters that are introduced, which I thought were very well written. And a little hand of applause to Rue for her new character that she put into the game, or into the book rather. I thought was quite enjoyable. I would say, yeah, if you played BFA, you'll get the book. You're not going to find yourself lost. But at the same time, though, I don't think that this book is necessary for the plot of Shadowlands. But I also don't think that that's what they're going for, right? Like, I think it's more of like a contextual bridge between the expansions, and it doesn't hold a bunch of dire information that you need to know in order to understand what's going on, right? Like, there are tidbits about what Sylvanas is actually doing, and how she's apparently kind of separated from good and evil. She doesn't let the idea of those things blind her from what she's trying to do. She's not trying to be the evil. She's not trying to be the good. She's just trying to do her mission. You know, it's not. There were times, like, for example, in Before the Storm, there was a point where Sylvanas held Azerite in her hand, and it's described that she felt as though she were a goddess of creation and destruction, which is like a gigantic hint at what Azerite is. I have an entire video about that if you want to hear my theory on what Azerite is. I believe it's the blood of two titans, Argus and Azeroth. And I believe that Sargeras having his sword imbued with Argus's power and stabbing into the world is part of what gave birth essentially to so much fucking Azerite, but creation and destruction. Azeroth creation, Argus destruction. Anyway, that I feel like is almost a huge, important thing. And in this book, you get some stuff from like Bwonsamdi about the cycle of life and death that you'd probably want to hear about. You get some stuff about Turalyon and Illyria, about the light and the void that you are definitely going to hear about in this review today. And as it is important, and I think it's good to read it, it doesn't seem as though it's going to be necessary for the lead into Shadowlands. So don't feel like you're missing some huge portion of lore that's going to contextualize Shadowlands for you. That's not the case. That's not what the book is. So with that being said, maybe give it a shot. Check it out if it sounds interesting to you. If you have already read it, or you're not going to and you just want to hear some spoilers, that's what we're going to get into now. So I'm going to give one last warning. Spoiler alert. I'm going to throw this thing up here on the screen. Spoilers coming up. If you do not want to be spoiled, leave the video right now. But before you do, hit subscribe and like the video, please. I would really, really appreciate it. Thank you guys very much if you stuck around till here. And maybe I'll catch you on the next one if you don't want the spoilers. So let's get into the spoilers. Okay, there's a couple main big points that I want to talk about. So the main plot of this book, all of the character development aside, right, is that the Horde has shifted to this council as opposed to having a war chief. And the Alliance is kind of like at the end of having this additional input, this multifaceted command style, and Anduin is starting to separate himself from the others and make decisions on his own. So it's an interesting contrast here where you have the Horde attempting to make this structure of leadership work, and finding that it's very difficult to do so, but eventually seemingly overcoming it. And I think it was written well. And then you have the Alliance kind of leaving that style of leadership, so to speak, and really having to have Anduin just make decisions on his own and learn to basically be his own person. And so throughout this book, a lot of Anduin's personal development is actually just centered around him really coming into being a man and being his own person, and not always letting the opinions and thoughts and words of other people dictate his actions and who he is, which could be a good thing, could be a bad thing. We're going to talk more about that because Anduin almost does something very, very sketchy in this book. The other main plot points is that basically Nathanos is tasked by Sylvanas. He and Sira Moonwarden are meant to kill Bwonsamdi. So they basically recruit the now a little bit older but childhood friend of Talanji, Apari, who's the new character written in by Madeline Rue. And she basically was crippled in an accident during the Siege of Dazara Lore. Now, Talanji was given an opportunity to save her friend, but her father was also fighting against the Alliance on his own. And so she had to make the decision to go and save her father instead of saving Apari. Apari had a grudge from this, and so that's what's going on. Apari is the daughter of Yasma, who was the worshipper of Shadra. If you guys remember from BFA, she's the one that consumed Shadra and turned into a spider Loa thing. So Apari is the daughter of her. And I believe Yasma was always warning her about Talanji and her father or something like that, but she didn't want to listen because Apari loved Talanji. They were best friends. So they basically recruit this faction called the Widow's Bite. Nathanos does. Apari is the leader of it. And they're supposed to kill Bwonsamdi. Now, it would seem that Bwonsamdi is kind of like the last link standing in the way of Sylvanas. In fact, that's what the book says. He's like the last hurdle. And so at the end of the book, Sylvanas shatters the Helm of Domination, and Nathanos shows up. You know, she's expecting to hear good news from him, and it turns out that another flaw in their plan, another failure, came about. And it actually is in Sylvanas' head. You actually have this italicized thought where it's Saurfang saying, "You just keep failing." And there has been some issues where Sylvanas has failed multiple times. This is just another one, and her plan did not follow through as it was supposed to. So on the other end of things, you have Anduin Wrynn, who's having some issues contacting Tyrande, because Tyrande is very, very upset that the Alliance hasn't retaliated in a more direct manner against the Horde for what happened at Teldrassil. I think Tyrande is really in a dangerous place, being literally hellbent as an avatar of vengeance against Sylvanas. And so because of this inaction from the Alliance, Tyrande basically is ignoring the missives sent to her by Anduin Wrynn in this book. Now, Anduin Wrynn has tried to write her multiple times, but they always come back unread. And so he's having a hard time reaching them. Well, you also learn in this book that there's a trouble going on within the spirit realm. The shamans have let Thrall know this, and it turns out the priestesses of Elune have experienced a similar thing. So basically, Thrall is summoned by Tyrande to Nordrassil, and she basically just tells him, bring what is owed. But Thrall doesn't necessarily understand what she means by that. We're going to talk more about that interaction later, but it ends up turning out that Tyrande wants Thrall to bring her the head of Sylvanas Windrunner. Now, while that doesn't happen in this book, obviously, later on in the book, you need to know that Sira Moonwarden does get captured by the Horde forces who join up with Zuldazar to stop the Widow's Bite and the Dark Rangers from assassinating Bwonsamdi at the necropolis in Nazmir. So this plot is drawn together in a pretty nice way. You learn that Thrall gives Sira to Anduin Wrynn as a show of trust and a sign of good faith. And Tyrande comes to see Sira Moonwarden along with Maiev Shadowsong and Chandris, Chandris Feathermoon or whatever the fuck her name is. And that's a very interesting interaction that, as we get through this, we will talk more about. I'll talk more about the specific interactions after I've given you kind of the outline of the book itself. Now, during this whole situation, Zakan, a.k.a. Zappy Boy, and he is referred to Zappy Boy as Zappy Boy in the book at least one time. I'm pretty sure Blizzard wanted Rue to write that in, because based on what I was reading in the book, it really seemed to me like Rue kind of wanted to kill Zakan off. I don't know if that's the case, but that's the way it felt, is that he probably should have died in the skirmish in Nazmir, saving these children that the Dark Rangers were shooting arrows at, and obviously missing on purpose because Dark Rangers don't miss. It was just theatrics, as Nathanos refers to it. So Zakan is kind of he's actually very present in this storyline, and I think it was tasteful. I think it was fun. I think Zakan as a character is interesting, and I think that the way he's written in to kind of bind everything together was done very well. He has some direct interactions with Bwonsamdi, which is really fun, and a lot with Talanji, and his innocence is really played on a lot in this book, and I really think that that's kind of sticks true to his character. So I think that's a lot of fun. But he's essentially the ambassador to the Horde in Zuldazar. Really, the reason why most of this stuff happens is because Talanji's really pissed off at the Horde for not retaliating against specifically the Proudmoors, because Jaina is effectively responsible for, in a large capacity, responsible for what happened in Zuldazar. She's really mad that they're not doing anything, because Talanji's a young, prideful ruler who's apparently 18, just like Anduin. I did not know this, but she's upset because they're not doing anything, and she's basically a young ruler who's taken this throne and is battling with her pride to try to and this is something she acknowledges directly. She has to let go of that pride and push that away in order to accept the help that she needs from the Horde, because if not, the Widow's Bite are going to tear them apart. So Zakan acts essentially as the ambassador between the two of those factions. So basically, you have this really overarching kind of thing going on where it's all connected in a way. Zuldazar is under siege again from the Widow's Bite, and Nathanos and Sylvanas are taking advantage of this poor relationship between Apari and Talanji to try to kill Bwonsamdi. That's like the main thing that's going on, while the factions are struggling with their leadership styles, and Anduin is seeking to become more of his own individual person, and the alliance is a little bit more fragmented than it has been in times past. So, some of the more specific situations I want to talk about. Fair Shaw. So, Matthias Shaw and Flynn they're gay, or at least bisexual, but it seems like they're gay with each other in this book. And I think that the introduction of it is tasteful. I think that it's well done. It kind of, it hits you in the feels a little bit. The way that men loving each other and the way that they perceive each other and that what they think about each other seems to be different, obviously, than the male and female relationships that you typically get in these kinds of books. And I quite enjoyed it. It was just a nice perspective, a way to see things a little differently. And again, I think the most important thing is it was tasteful. It didn't feel forced. And it was pretty heartwarming. Like, it was pretty wholesome. I quite liked it. And actually, it made me kind of like Matthias Shaw as a character, which I didn't think that I would say. You know, I don't really like Shaw very much. A similar thing happened with Nathanos, where he gave away a badge kind of pocket, pen thing that was presumably given to him by Sylvanas as a trade to have Apari destroy shrines of Bwonsamdes. Because apparently something that's very meaningful was required in order to perform the rituals to destroy these shrines, which takes away from Bwonsamdi's power. Which, on that note, Bwonsamdi basically says, without worship, I don't have any power. In fact, throughout the book, as they're destroying shrines and as followers of Bwonsamdi are diminishing, Bwonsamdi's kind of like fading out of existence. Like, he can't manifest himself fully. He's like half translucent. He's like a ghost, basically. So that is an interesting thing that I want to expand upon more in a different video. But it definitely seems as though, it doesn't seem, I mean, it's the case where as their worship dwindles, so too does their power. But I'm pretty sure that's a relatively standard thing in fantasy, is that worship gives deities power. Like, I think that's pretty standard. But so it's just interesting to see that represented in the game. So again, yeah, Fair Shaw, that whole thing is a nice little ship, no pun intended, because most of their journey was spent on a ship together. And it was fun. So let's talk about Illyria and Turalyon, because this is a big one. This is one I want to talk about bad. So you guys know that Illyria has kind of taken the void into herself. She is like the void elf. Like, if there was one that you would used to describe the void elves, it's her. And we know that the void claws at her mind. It's, is it a dangerous influence with Illyria, rather. Turalyon, Illyria, wow. With Illyria. They are tasked, she and Turalyon, with finding Sylvanas no matter the cost. Hunt her down, we need to find her. Well, they interpret no matter the cost as doing some pretty horrible things. So Illyria loses patience. They basically track this. They're tracking this Dark Ranger, Visrin. They come across this group of innocents, and the whispers in Illyria's mind basically fucking tell her that one of the people in this group knows something about where the Dark Ranger is. So the Void is basically telling her, like, you'll find your answer within this group. And it tells her about this woman, specifically, a mother that's in the group, who has her children with her, that she's the one that knows something. So Turalyon tries to nicely talk with this woman, and she basically is just playing Turalyon for a fool and, you know, taking the rations that they're giving her in exchange for information, and basically just kind of indirectly kind of like giving them the finger because she's not actually telling them anything. She's just wasting their fucking time. Well, Illyria gets tired of that. So Illyria takes this woman and reaches into her mind with the Void. She basically plumbs this woman's mind with the Void, which causes her immense pain and discomfort, and is basically racking her mind with the Void, trying to pull the darkness out of the deceit, the illusion, the darkness, the lies out of this woman, and to gain information. So she basically like mind fucks this woman with the Void. Turalyon is very hesitant at this. He doesn't like it. But Turalyon eventually joins in with this tactic, and Turalyon begins pinning people down with light chains while Illyria mind fucks them with the Void. Holy shit. And one of the biggest complaints I saw in another review was that this is out of character for them. For Illyria, not really. She ate the heart of a Void god. She literally became like a Void revenant. This is not out of character for someone who is literally fused with the most malevolent force that we know of in the universe. That's not out of character. In Turalyon, I mean, they're wed, so their bond is already stronger than most. Turalyon's very, very reluctant to join in on this, but Illyria basically convinces him to do so. Is that out of character for Turalyon? No. Turalyon was willing to lock away his lover because Zira told him to. Turalyon's a fucking fanatic. Turalyon is one of the original paladins of the Silver Hand and is bound to the light in such a way that part of Turalyon probably is the light. Like, it's literally bound into him. He's light forged. Just like Illyria is essentially, void sworn, if that's what you want to call it. This isn't out of character for either of them. They're both kind of crazy. But the point of this, I think, is to further the illustration of the light and the void. In my interview with Madeline Rue, she says that the easy, common perception of the void and light is that they are opposites of one another. But she says that that's not necessarily the right perception. So I think what's going on here is it's an illustration to show you that the light and the void inevitably are going to work together. They are going to lead to the same destiny, if you will, at the end of the road, no matter what. They're not equal opposites of one another. They're two sides of the same exact coin. And they're not necessarily in direct opposition. Because when you think about what Chronicle tells you about where the void came from, it literally tells you that the void came from the dissipation of the light. The light's existence led to the non-existence, if you will, because the void is essentially non-existence, of the void. The light is responsible for the existence of the void, or perhaps vice versa. The point is that people see these opposing things when really they're not. It's like a yin and a yang rather than a direct opposition. That's not how it's supposed to be perceived. But this in the book is definitely illustrating that the light in a way may be complicit to the actions of the void. And that essentially, no matter what, the light is basically going to help the efforts of the void. Think about this. Where the light goes, if it fades, the void will follow. Neither of them are necessarily good for us. And there doesn't seem to be a balance between the two of them. It's either light or it's void. There doesn't really seem to be a great illustration of something that sits right in the middle besides those who wield the powers separately, like disc priests, having the discipline between the two forces, but they're not literally imbued with light and void at the same time. Because we know what happens when light and void join. Explosions, pain, but also the ability to see directly through time and see what is really actually happening truly at that very moment. I'll finish with this about the light and void. They both go together to form destiny. This is what Locust Walker is trying to tell Illyria when she first starts learning about the void. He basically says neither one of them are fully responsible for destiny. Neither one is responsible for everything, for seeing what is to come. Think about it this way. The light sees an endpoint, a grand destiny to be arrived at, right? There are some forces which seem to break that, and perhaps the light actually can't even account for, like Illidan fucking destroying Zira. Zira was trying to fulfill a prophecy that she foresaw, but because Illidan was all imbued with fel, it did not come to pass. Not in that manner, anyway. Think about it this way. When Illyria and Turalyon are dispatched to go to Argus by Zira in the 1000 Years of War audio drama, which, God, you need to listen to if you haven't. It's free. It's on YouTube. 1000 Years of War. Go listen to it after this video. Zira basically dispatches them to Argus to figure out what the fuck is going on. And Illyria and Turalyon are concerned about their safety on Argus. And Zira literally says, "You will not die on Argus." With absolute certainty, Zira tells them, "You won't die. You won't." She knows that they won't, but she can't see what happens to them once they go to Argus. So this tells me Zira can see the end point between now and here, but she doesn't know about everything that happens here. Well, it turns out that the reason why Illyria and Turalyon survive on Argus is because Illyria wields the void to save them. She uses a void portal to teleport them off of Argus. So either Zira was lying about not being able to see how they escaped, or the reality of the situation is that the void can see all possible paths, the way that you get there, but the void can't see the truth of what actually happens in the end. Where the light is the opposite. The light sees the truth, it sees the end point, but it doesn't see the paths you take to get there. That's why they go together, because between point A and B, you have the light's prophecy, but everything that exists between it are pathways made possible by the void. That's how this works. They're not in opposition to one another. They rely upon one another. And the thing is that when Illyria is swimming in the void with Locust Walker, enveloped in the void itself, she, in fear, reaches out to the light, and when the light connects with her, she's jolted with a revelation. First off, not only did the light come to her in the fucking void, the light showed up in the void, but it didn't show her a prophecy of the future. It didn't show her the many possibilities and paths of the void. When the void and light came together within Illyria, she saw what was happening in real time to Turalyon, in a different part of the cosmos. This to me illustrates that the light and the void are constructs of another force, and when they are bound together, when they meet, they show you what only something like that force could show you. An omnipotent peering through time. And that's why destiny is bound between light and void, because they're, I perceive it anyway, as essentially aspects of time, stasis and entropy. All that is and all that ever could be, in the end point which is inevitably bound to both. And this ties into another theory, but it would seem to me like the relationship between the light and the void is being illustrated in a very interesting way in this book. Illyria and Turalyon are so interesting in this book. And it's not out of character. It isn't. It's not. Your romanticized idea of what a character should be is not always what a character will be. And unfortunately, if you're not the writer, that's not your choice to make. Moving on. This technique used by Illyria is actually almost used by Anduin later in the book. Because Jaina catches Illyria and Turalyon doing this and is like, what in the fuck are you doing? What the fuck is that? You think Anduin would condone what you're doing? And Illyria is like, no matter the cost. Turalyon says condescendingly to Jaina, all will be made clear in time, which is an interesting little snippet of dialogue there, considering what I just said about the light and void. And Jaina goes and tells Anduin. And I'm expecting Anduin to be worried about it, but Anduin feels pretty okay about it because it's working. They're getting leads on where Sylvanas is going. Anduin is becoming basically accepting of the fact that they might have to do some bad things to innocent people in order to catch the big bad guy. To chase the greater good, they will do bad things. Never seen that with other characters before, have we? Like Arthas or Sargeras. Or maybe even Sylvanas. It's interesting. When they bring Sira Moonwarden to the Alliance, when Thrall sends her over there, Anduin's like, where the fuck is Sylvanas? And Sira's like, I'm not going to tell you shit. It's already over. You're fucked. I'm not telling you a damn thing. And it describes the shadowy energy moving down Anduin's arm and coalescing in his hand as he stares at Sira angrily. And to me, this illustrates that Anduin was gonna do the same thing that Illyria was doing. He was gonna use the void to force his way into Sira's mind and get her to give him the information, regardless of whether or not she wanted to give it to him. He doesn't do it, but he strongly considers it. And that's very, very important. Illyria and Turalyon are having an influence on Anduin. The light and the void are dangerous on both sides. And that plot, that will spiral out of control. The whole Illyria Turalyon thing, that's not going to turn out good. I'm telling you right now, that's not going to go well. Some other stuff just to talk about here in this. There's a portion where Bwansamdi talks about the great cycle, like the cycle of life and death, and I want to read this to you guys. I think it's in chapter 25. So this is what Bwansamdi says to Talanji to try to make her feel better about this whole situation. You need to find your own strength, he rasped, his voice as weak as his image. Your own way. The Zandalari way? Talanji scoffed. It failed. I failed. Like I failed my father. Like I failed Apari and Zakan. It might sound strange coming from the lower of graves, but there is always hope, Your Majesty, Bonsamdi told her, his eyes glowing faintly behind his bone mask. Death brings life. The great wheel turns. Slowly, yes. Over aeons, but it turns. Bodies decay, and new life springs from it. All things that seem eternal end, then rise to find new purpose. Talanji gazed up at him, her heart beating faster. Then my father, shh, you're not listening, child. You're only hearing what you want to. There is a harmony to things, a way and a flow. Ancient ones, spirits, loa. In time, we too must embrace the end, the long, deep slumber. And without us, our followers will find strength in other things, in themselves or new beliefs. They grieve, they grow, just like you. And when the veil of dreaming lifts, the eternal and great beings climb on the wheel once more, bound to it. And slowly, ever so slowly, the wheel spins. He paused, waiting until she locked eyes with him. In that way, the ancient and powerful things of this world are eternal, Your Majesty. Zandala, she breathed. The fires burned in the jungle, smoke rose above the trees. Out there, hidden in the shadows, the Dark Rangers and Apari with her Widow's Bite fanatics plotted their next move. It is not lost. It is never lost. The Loa nodded, his frown at last dissolving into a familiar smirk. I am weak, but not gone. They will try to take the necropolis now, my place of power. Stop them there, and I will help you rebuild this land. The ancient and powerful things of this world are eternal, and so was hope. But this is, I'm pretty sure, so in my interview with Madeline Rue, she basically said that there are portions of the book that are explicitly and meticulously gone over by Blizzard to make sure that they say exactly what she wants, or what they want to say. They are putting a message in there that Madeline doesn't really have much control over. This, I think, is one of them. To go over it again, death brings life. The great wheel turns. Slowly, yes, over aeons, but it turns. Bodies decay and new life springs from it. All things that seem eternal end, then rise to find new purpose. There is a harmony to things, a way and a flow. Ancient ones, spirits, Loa, in time we too must embrace the end, the long, deep slumber. And without us, our followers find strength in other things. They grieve, they grow, just like you, and when the veil of dreaming lifts, the eternal and great beings climb on the wheel once more, bound to it, and slowly, ever so slowly, the wheel spins. In that way, the ancient and powerful things of this world are eternal, Your Majesty. Hope is not lost. Ancient and powerful things of this world are eternal, and so was hope. Oh, that's a great little passage. I like that a lot, because that's really just alluding to the cyclical nature of things, which I have long discussed here on the channel, about how life and death is a cycle, and that you can't expel part of the cycle just because you don't like it, or because it benefits you in some way. Death is necessary, and it's eternal. Just as eternal as life, or hope, or whatever. You can't get away from that. And I love the way that Bonsamdi is illustrating this. I think that there's more depth to what he's saying there about like the ancient ones eventually going into the slumber and having the veil of dreaming lifted from you, because that's again kind of equating sleep to death in the Warcraft universe, which is not an uncommon way to perceive sleep, like the eternal sleep, the great sleep. So that's interesting what he's saying, and I would like to elaborate more on that in the future. So the Tyrande thing, I'll finish with this. Tyrande is fucking scary in this book. The descriptions are fucking scary. She is cold. She's in a dark place, Tyrande. And I think it's going to turn out pretty bad. Like, this is... Tyrande might actually end up being the person who kills Sylvanas. If somebody does kill Sylvanas, it's probably going to be Tyrande. But as of right now, it's not looking good. Because when Tyrande and Maiev, Shadowsong, and Chandra's Feathermoon come to see Syrah, who they're holding in the stockades, Tyrande is basically going to execute her. And Syrah basically says that that she herself is broken and everything inside of her is ugliness and hatred, and the only thing that quells those feelings is bloodshed. Syrah is broken, like bad. And Maiev recognizes it because Maiev was once in a place very familiar and very similar herself. And Tyrande just doesn't feel anything. Tyrande is so disconnected from from any level of empathy. She is fully just enraptured by this vengeance in the rage of Elune. It is dangerous where she's going. She eventually is talked out of the execution by Maiev and Chandras, and she takes her sword and slices Syrah on the neck, cutting open a wound no thicker than the width of her fingernail, I believe is how it's described. No blood comes out because Syrah doesn't bleed. But it's kind of fucked up because in that moment, since she became the Night Warrior, she felt more horribly alive than she has in a long time. So it's like enacting vengeance seems to be like literally what sustains her. And trust me, that is not good. Like I'm sure there will be vengeance for Teldrassil. I'm sure that time will come. But if Tyrande lets that consume who she is, if it hasn't already, Tyrande will end up in the ground. And there will be a path of ruin left behind where she went. Tyrande is to the point where she is making, before Thrall promises to bring the head of Sylvanas, Tyrande is making like threats to Thrall about how the children of those who died at Teldrassil will come for them. Oh, they will come, and they will feel their vengeance that day. And there won't be an armistice to save them. Ooh, Tyrande scares the fuck out of me in this book, dude. It's really spooky. It's scary. Last thing I want to talk about is Sylvanas, when she shatters the helm of domination. It says this in the epilogue of the book. This is what is described. The helm seared her hands, resisting her. But Sylvanas had come ready. It could not resist the irresistible, the power of death and unmaking itself. Now, I am led to believe that this is not an inserted line by Blizzard, but this is just written this way. But I basically said, does this confirm that death and unmaking are the same thing? Because if it does, you guys know who I'm talking to. You know who I'm thinking about. Argus the Unmaker. 100%. That's who my mind goes to. Death Titan, Scythe, Death Ability, Soul Blight, Soul Burst, what the fuck ever. But he's called the Unmaker. So I was curious, are those the same thing? It doesn't seem like that's the case. They're referred to as possibly separate things. So Argus, probably more as the Unmaker, is a representation of destruction, just like I believe Azeroth is a representation of creation. And then perhaps down a step in power, you have death and life, right? So basically you have creation, destruction, light and shadow, which I think are bound with creation and destruction, life and death, because I would say death comes from darkness and destruction, and life would come from light and creation. Makes sense to me. Then you have order and chaos on the sides to kind of help keep it all in check. And I think we have this top-down view of the cosmos here. Death and unmaking. I'm just going to say this. I'm going to talk about the first ones more, but if I had to guess who two of the first ones were, Azeroth and Argus. I don't know if they're even on the same level as the other Titans. I think they might be a little bit higher up here. I think Elune could maybe be their child, like light and shadow, creation and destruction as a mixture of both potentially. So I'm going to elaborate more on that, but I just wanted to throw that out there because people have already mentioned it to me, the creation or the death and unmaking thing. From what I understand, it's being referred to as two separate things. So just something to think about. But it's one of those things where you got to read it. You got to, if you want to hear about this kind of stuff, you got to read it. You want Fairshah, you want the assassination attempt of Bwonsamdi, you want more Nathanos, you want more Sira, Anduin, you want more Jaina, you want more Thrall, you want some Zakan, the Zappy boy, you want some Bwonsamdi and Talanji. Get this book. It was worth it. It was worth every second to read it and every penny that I spent to buy it. And it was worth 2 copies. So with that being said, you guys, that's it. I'm going to stop it here at 50 minutes. If you enjoyed, like button, subscribe button, Twitter, Twitch, follow me, Patreon, hit it up. Special thanks to my patrons, by the way. They got early access to this video. Heck yeah. Special thanks to you guys for making this type of content possible. Giving me the motivation to sit here for 50 minutes and fucking just spew at you. Unscripted about this book. I hope you guys enjoyed. I really, really do. And I hope you guys, if you get the book, that you enjoyed as well. If you do have the book and you enjoyed it, go leave a positive review on Amazon. Let's drown out some of these unfair, just rude fucking reviews. Some people are just dicks. And it's not even about the book. They're just dicks. So, anyway. Thank you to Madeline Rue for an awesome experience, an awesome book. A great way to bridge to Shadowlands. Yeah, I enjoyed it. I appreciate you guys very much. Thank you so much for watching this video. Stay awesome, and until next time, I'll see you guys later. Peace!